I've always found solace in the quiet corners of supermarkets. The way the fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sterile glow over the polished floors and neatly stacked shelves, offered a sense of order and predictability that I craved in my chaotic life. But that night, as I worked the graveyard shift alone, I realized that the familiarity of the supermarket could also be a facade, masking something far more sinister lurking within its aisles. It started innocently enough. The clock struck midnight, and the store fell into an eerie silence broken only by the occasional beep of the checkout scanners. I was stocking shelves in the canned goods aisle when I first heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible over the drone of the refrigeration units. At first, I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me, the exhaustion of another long shift manifesting in auditory hallucinations. But then I heard it again, clearer this time, like a breathy murmur just beyond the edge of hearing. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to make out the words. "Help me." The voice was faint, almost desperate, and seemed to be coming from the far end of the aisle. I hesitated, torn between the instinct to investigate and the primal urge to flee. But curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured deeper into the darkness, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering overhead like dying stars. As I neared the end of the aisle, the voice grew louder, more insistent, echoing off the shelves like a ghostly refrain. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped, leaving me standing alone in the silence, my skin prickling with unease. I shook off the feeling of dread that threatened to consume me and continued my rounds, chalking the incident up to fatigue and an overactive imagination. But the sense of being watched lingered, a shadowy presence hovering just beyond the edges of perception. Hours passed in a blur of monotony, the minutes dragging like lead as I counted down the moments until sunrise. But as the witching hour approached, the supermarket seemed to come alive with a malevolent energy, the aisles twisting and distorting like a funhouse mirror. I found myself drawn to the deli section, the gleaming display cases filled with rows of neatly arranged meats and cheeses. But as I reached out to restock the shelves, my hand brushed against something cold and clammy, a hand, reaching out from the darkness beneath the counter. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backward as the figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, her features twisted in a rictus of agony, her eyes hollow sockets devoid of light. She reached out to me, her fingers curling into claws as she whispered my name, a single word laden with sorrow and despair. I turned and fled, my footsteps echoing off the tiled floor as I raced toward the safety of the checkout lanes. But with each step, the supermarket seemed to shift and warp around me, the aisles stretching out like a labyrinth with no end in sight. I stumbled and fell, the hard impact knocking the breath from my lungs as I sprawled on the ground, my vision swimming with stars. And then, as I lay there gasping for air, I saw them, the faces, twisted and contorted, peering out from the darkness with empty eyes and gaping mouths. They surrounded me, a sea of spectral figures swaying in time to some unseen rhythm, their whispers merging into a cacophony of voices that threatened to drive me mad. I closed my eyes and prayed for salvation, but the darkness offered no solace, only the cold embrace of oblivion. When I awoke, the first rays of dawn were filtering through the windows, casting long shadows across the empty aisles. I stumbled to my feet, my body aching and bruised, and made my way to the exit, desperate to escape the nightmare that had consumed me. But as I stepped out into the cool morning air, I knew that the supermarket would haunt me forever, its dark secrets lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to ensnare the unwary in its web of shadows. And though I tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the mind, a figment of my fevered imagination, I could never shake the feeling that something had followed me out into the light, waiting patiently for the darkness to return.